Ladies and gentlemen, a man enters your life. He is not cloaked in black robes, nor does he hiss incantations in the dead of night. No, he is pleasant, articulate, even magnetic. His words soothe, his laughter is rich, and his advice, at first, seems wise. He does not storm the gates of your soul. He strolls in with an air of familiarity, and by the time you realize he was never your friend, the damage has already been done. The greatest trick of a devil's agent is to appear as an angel of light, masking corruption beneath charm and intelligence. This is the oldest deception in history, the very nature of evil itself, to masquerade as good. If one were to meet a man truly sent from the devil, one would not recoil in horror or recognize him immediately. No, the danger lies in the fact that such a man will often be the most persuasive, the most eloquent, and the most seemingly virtuous presence in the room. It is human nature to trust what pleases the eye, what soothes the ear, and what appeals to our own desires. Evil does not charge at us with a snarl. It comes dressed in fine words and warm smiles, cloaked in wisdom that feels reasonable but is, at its core, poisonous. The man sent from the devil is not the brute who roars, but the whisperer who convinces. He does not demand your soul with force. He allows you to hand it over willingly, believing all the while that you are making a wise decision. History has shown us this deception time and again. The leaders who led their people to ruin were often the most charismatic. The false prophets who led nations astray were not wild-made madmen, but articulate, intelligent, and deeply persuasive figures. The devil's greatest allies in the world are not the openly wicked, but the secretly corrupt, those who do not appear as destroyers, but as saviors. This deception is so effective because it does not present itself as evil. If one were to see a villain with horns and claws, one would flee. But if one sees a man who speaks of justice, progress, and enlightenment while leading others toward destruction, one hesitates. One may even admire him, and by the time the deception is recognized, the roots have already spread deep. The most dangerous lies are the ones that contain a grain of truth. The man sent from the devil does not speak in outright falsehoods. He twists truth just enough to make it unrecognizable. He tells you that what is wrong is merely misunderstood, that virtue is outdated, that sin is freedom. He does not push you into destruction. He leads you to believe you are walking toward wisdom. And so the world is filled with those who have been fooled, those who have followed such a man only to find themselves lost. When the mask finally slips, when the angel of light reveals the shadow beneath, it is often too late. That is the nature of this deception. By the time one sees the trap, one is already caught. To guard against such deception, one must look beyond words and charm. One must look at the fruit, not the flower. Does this man bring truth, or does he distort it? Does he build or quietly erode? Does he elevate virtue, or does he redefine it to suit his purposes? If one pays attention, the deception unravels. But if one does not, if one is too enchanted to question, then the trap is sprung and the fall begins. Evil rarely arrives with a trumpet blast. It does not declare itself, nor does it demand immediate surrender. Instead, it seeps in quietly, unnoticed, like a slow poison in the bloodstream. It does not need force to win, only small compromises, made over time, that lead men away from truth. A man sent from the devil does not demand that you abandon your principles all at once. That would be too obvious, too abrupt. Instead, he asks only for the smallest concession, a harmless bending of the truth, a single exception to the rule. It is nothing, you tell yourself. It is practical. It is necessary. But the moment you take that step, the next one becomes easier, and the one after that even easier still. Corruption, when subtle, is far more dangerous than overt wickedness. If one is faced with a clear evil, one resists, but when it comes in palatable portions, in the name of reason, progress, or even kindness, one does not notice that a line has been crossed. The first compromise may seem trivial, telling a half-truth to avoid conflict, turning a blind eye to something questionable, justifying a small injustice for a greater good. But each compromise changes the standard, shifts the foundation ever so slightly, until one day a man finds himself defending what he once abhorred. History is filled with the wreckage of those who fell, not because they leaped into darkness, but because they inched toward it, one small step at a time. The tyrant who commits great atrocities did not wake up one morning and decide to be evil. He started with minor rationalizations, excuses that justified cruelty in the name of order, in the name of necessity. The man who betrays his own soul does not do so in a moment of madness, but through a series of choices, so gradual, he does not realize when he has changed. This is the power of subtle corruption. It numbs the conscience rather than shocking it. It does not break the mind, it bends it, so gently that the change feels natural. A man who once swore to uphold the truth finds himself justifying lies because they serve a larger purpose. A leader who once vowed to protect the innocent allows injustice, believing it to be an unfortunate but acceptable sacrifice. The shift is never sudden. It is always slow, always reasonable, until reason itself is twisted into submission. The man sent from the devil understands this well. He does not argue for destruction. He suggests only that one be practical. He does not demand compromise. He merely presents it as wisdom. He does not attack virtue. He redefines it, ever so slightly, until it is no longer recognizable. And when he has done his work, when the foundation has been eroded, he does not need to push. The house will collapse on its own. The only defense against such corruption is vigilance. One must recognize the danger in the first small compromise, no matter how harmless it seems. One must ask, does this lead me closer to truth or further from it? Does this strengthen my soul, or does it make my principles more flexible, more convenient? For once corruption takes root, it is far harder to remove than it was to prevent. Evil does not announce itself. It does not come with fire and fury. It whispers, it suggests, it makes a case for itself in soft, reasonable tones. And if one listens long enough, one may wake up to find that the battle has already been lost. The battle between good and evil is not some distant war fought in the heavens, nor is it confined to the pages of myth and legend. It is real, it is present, and it is waged in the quiet, ordinary moments of our daily lives. Every decision we make, every word we speak, every thought we entertain, these are the battlefields where the war for our souls is won or lost. There is a great illusion that evil is something external, something that exists only in grand, dramatic forms, the tyrant, the murderer, the obvious villain. But the truth is far more unsettling. The battle for a man's soul does not begin in the open. It begins in the small, hidden corners of the heart, in the choices no one else sees. It begins with a temptation to do what is easy instead of what is right, to remain silent instead of speaking truth, to prioritize comfort over conviction. The man sent from the devil understands this well. He does not arrive with chains. He arrives with choices. He does not demand allegiance. He only encourages indifference. He knows that for most men, the battle is not lost in one great fall, but in a series of small surrenders. This is why so many fail to recognize the war they are in. They believe they are safe because they have not openly chosen evil. But neutrality is an illusion. Every man is moving toward something, either toward truth or away from it. The man who stands still in the face of corruption is not standing at all. He is drifting. And one does not drift toward the light. The war for souls is fought in secret, before it is ever seen in public. It is fought in the decision to tell the truth when lying would be easier. It is fought in the refusal to laugh at a cruel joke. It is fought in the rejection of compromise when integrity is at stake. And it is lost when a man tells himself that these things do not matter, that his choices are too small to have consequence. But there are no small choices in this war. Every moment is a test, every decision a step toward one side or the other. The devil does not need to turn a man into a monster to claim his soul. He only needs to make him indifferent. He only needs to make him believe that his choices are meaningless, that his integrity is flexible, that his conscience is an inconvenience. This is why the war is not won by the strong, nor lost by the weak, but decided by the watchful. The man who remains aware of the battle will see the enemy long before the trap is sprung. He will recognize temptation before it takes root. He will see that the war is not somewhere far away. It is here, now, in this moment, in this choice. The greatest victories are won in silence, in the places no one applauds, in the battles fought within a man's own heart. And the greatest defeats come not from one great betrayal, but from the slow erosion of conviction. The war for souls is fought not in the heavens alone, but in the quiet places where no one is watching, except the one who sees all. Just as a tree is known by its fruit, a man sent by darkness reveals himself, not always in bold declarations of evil, but in his influence, his words, and the quiet destructions he leaves in his wake. He does not always come as an enemy, nor does he always seek open ruin. More often he operates in subtlety, his work going unnoticed until the damage has already been done. To recognize such a man, one must not look at his promises but at the results of his presence. What does he leave behind? Does he elevate those around him, or does he corrupt them? Does he speak truth, or does he twist it? Does he build, or does he erode? His true nature is not found in his intentions, real or professed, but in the fruit that grows from his influence. The first mark of the tempter is that he does not attack virtue directly. He merely suggests that it be flexible. He does not demand that a man abandon his morals. He only asks that they be adjusted to suit the moment. He whispers that truth must be practical, that integrity must be balanced with ambition, that righteousness is good in theory but not always wise in practice. And so, a man who once held his principles firm begins to bend them, little by little, until they are unrecognizable. The tempter knows that outright lies are too easy to spot. Instead, he distorts the truth just enough to make it uncertain. He does not tell you that good is evil. He simply asks, but what if good and evil are not so different? He takes a virtue and stretches it beyond its proper bounds, turning love into indulgence, justice into vengeance, humility into weakness. He shifts definitions, blurring lines until the light and the dark look the same. Wherever he walks, unrest follows. He does not encourage gratitude, nor does he allow contentment. Instead, he whispers of what is lacking, of what is unfair, of what is owed. He stirs resentment where there was once peace, dissatisfaction where there was once joy. He plants the seed of "I deserve more" in the hearts of men, knowing that a man who is never satisfied is easily led astray. The tempter often speaks of unity, but his words always carry a hidden edge. He does not unite people in love. He unites them in resentment. He gathers men together not to build, but to tear down a common enemy. He convinces them that their cause is righteous, that their fury is justified, that the destruction they bring is necessary for justice. And when the dust settles, they find that they have not built anything at all. He takes what is destructive and calls it powerful. He tells men that arrogance is confidence, that cruelty is justice, that recklessness is freedom. He whispers that the meek are weak, that patience is foolishness, that mercy is a flaw. And so, men who once sought virtue begin to admire those who reject it, mistaking corruption for strength. Where once there was a clear line between right and wrong, the tempter brings excuses. Everyone does it, he says. It's not that serious. He tells men that their actions do not matter, that their failures are inevitable, that their guilt is unnecessary. He removes the weight of consequence, making sin seem trivial, until the chains are too heavy to break. The final and most revealing mark of the tempter is this: wherever he stays, destruction follows. Families grow cold, friendships wither, faith is eroded. Not all at once, not in obvious ways, but steadily, subtly, inevitably. He does not need to strike with force. He only needs to plant the right seed and wait. And when he is gone, the ruin remains. To recognize the man sent from darkness, one must not be deceived by his words alone. He may speak of wisdom, justice, even love, but what does he leave behind? What happens to those who follow him? Do they become better, stronger, truer? Or do they become restless, uncertain, lost? A tree is known by its fruit, and a man is known by his influence. There comes a moment when the mask slips, when the charm fades, and the true nature of the deceiver is revealed. This moment is often quiet, almost imperceptible, a sudden realization, a pattern recognized, a question that lingers too long. But once it comes, once the truth stands bare before you, neutrality is no longer an option. To see evil and do nothing is to grant it power. The greatest weapon of the deceiver is not force, nor is it fear, it is doubt. He thrives in uncertainty, in hesitation. As long as you are unsure, as long as you question your own instincts, he remains in control. He does not need you to follow him blindly. He only needs you to remain undecided, because indecision is its own form of surrender. It is an uncomfortable truth, one that many resist. We would prefer to believe that evil is always distant, always someone else's concern. We tell ourselves that we are not responsible for what we recognize, that silence is not the same as participation. But silence is never neutral. It is permission. A man who has been unmasked will not plead his innocence. He will question your judgment. He will not answer your accusations. He will accuse you in return. He will not admit to deception. He will insist that you are imagining things, that you are overreacting, that you do not see as clearly as you think. He will weaponize your doubt against you, hoping that you will retreat into silence rather than act on what you know. And many do, not because they are blind, but because they are afraid. To acknowledge evil is to take on a burden. It forces action. It demands responsibility. It calls for courage. And courage is costly. But the price of inaction is greater. A single deceiver left unchecked can poison many. A single lie left unchallenged can reshape the truth for an entire generation. Evil, when ignored, does not stay small. It grows, it spreads. It tightens its grip, slowly, subtly, until even those who once saw it clearly begin to doubt themselves. This is why the unveiling of the deceiver is a moment of decision. It is the point of no return. Once you see, you cannot unsee. You may close your eyes, you may pretend you never noticed, but deep within, you will know that you have chosen to look away. And that choice, too, has consequences. There is a time for patience, a time for observation, but there is also a time for action, a time to speak, a time to stand. The deceiver relies on hesitation. He depends on fear. But the moment someone refuses to remain silent, refuses to be manipulated, refuses to play along, his power begins to unravel. And so the question is not whether you will recognize the deceiver. You will. The real question is, when you do, what will you do about it?